Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be experiencing the classic dead stick landing. Now the interesting thing with the dead stick landing, of course, is this is one of the few Microsoft Flight Simulator achievements that kind of scares some folks. They think without having control of the engine that it makes it relatively dangerous to get the plane down on the ground. While that's certainly true, it's actually not as terrifying as an exercise as most people make it out to be. And a lot of it just simply comes down to maintaining speed and maintaining the appropriate speed until the last possible moment when you can start kind of making the plane dirty. Now, there's a bunch of mistakes people make when they attempt these maneuvers. One, of course, is not managing their drag correctly. Now, this aircraft, of course, has some lovely flaps off of it. This is not a Cessna 172N. This is a nice little S. Now, the S version has 30 degrees of flaps. The older versions had 40 degrees of flaps. And one of the things we learned very quickly in the early days of flying those older versions was once you put those suckers down, you were committed. And you had to really, really hope that you were going to be pretty darn close to the ground in order to safely get us there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get this thing down to the ground, and we're going to do it completely dead. We're going to cut the power out and do all that other good stuff that kind of comes along with it. I'm even going to be fair here and go ahead and establish kind of a relatively low speed, so it's like pretending like this is something that happened to us in the pattern. So go ahead and give it a couple taps of trim, and the real plane's a lot easier to trim than this. You just put it where you want, and boop, boop, and you're usually pretty good to go. Fantastic. So it looks pretty good. We've got a little runway out there. Everything's looking pretty good. Normally, when I was in the early days of my flight training, they always said, oh, put down 10 degrees of flaps, to help maintain proper speed. But we're not going to do that. We're simply, and we're dead. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get ourselves to glide speed immediately. The glide speed on a Cessna 172 is 65 knots. Once we've achieved 65 knots, we want to maintain the speed until we get ourselves all the way down to the ground and kind of do that final flare. Next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we get as close to the runway as we possibly can while maintaining that 65 knots. So as I look at my window here, I can see I've got my lovely little runway right there. It's sitting at the end. The engine's cut out. We're doing about 70 knots. And as I just look out the window, I can feel exactly how quickly I seem to be approaching the ground here. Now, I can tell you right now that this aircraft is going to have no difficulty getting us down. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and introduce a little bit of drag to the airplane as we kind of bring ourselves around. Now, the big challenge here is we are actually very, very high. Once you introduce flaps to this aircraft, you can no longer use 65 knots. You're supposed to use 60 knots. So I'm going to go ahead and dump that last notch of flaps down just like that. And I can see that I'm still too fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my right rudder all the way forward, and I'm just going to go ahead and tip my left wing down here. Now remember, I've got no engine power, but that does not affect the control of this airplane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this position until I get very, very close to the end of the runway. Now I'm going to lift my nose up, and I'm not going to try to put the plane on the ground. Instead, I'm going to let the plane bleed off its speed. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull my nose back down, and now we can get ready to actually plop this thing down. Since we're already in the correct configuration, we might as well do the good old-fashioned commercial maneuver and land down there in the white bar, right as the engines come down to a complete stop. So you can see this aircraft has very, very little difficulty at getting us down on the ground, even without the engine, on account of the fact that it was just a matter of maintaining the appropriate speed, making sure we had the runway made before we brought in the drag, and then bringing the drag very, very slowly. Now, when we came running over the end there and we had that excess power, the way we got rid of it, of course, was flying the plane into a slip, which was flying it sideways. Enjoy.